Bye.
All right. Good evening, everybody. It is October the 16th. It is my daughter's 23rd birthday and my dad's 84th birthday. So I wish them both a happy birthday today. My daughter works at Berry College in residential life there. So if anybody's planning on going to Berry College, well, she's only be there this one year because then she's going to graduate school. And my dad is long since retired and lives in Alabama. So, anyways, so tonight we've got another. As always, I have a huge plans that I'm sure I will not get through, but here they are here. So last week I went over monopolist competition and finished that. So you guys that are there or working on that now, that unit, make sure you're watching these live videos. I'm still seeing people. Of course, if you're watching this one now, then I'm just preaching to the choir. You guys know how valuable, how much information I'm giving you here. And I also did oligopoly, and I left you with two practice problems. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over those two practice problems, and then we're going to get into the factor market. The factor market is it's supply and demand, but it's just the other side of it. It's the buying and selling of resources, the land, labor, and capital. So we'll get into that here in a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and stop my video so that I don't have that going on here. And I'm going to keep on going here. I've got my recording going. Everything's good. So here we go. All right. So this is the one I left last week. If you have not watched that video from last week, what you probably want to do is stop the video right now and restart it. I'm sorry, then do this practice problem and then restart it once you've got it. So I'm going to go ahead and start to answer this in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, ready, go. All right. So I gave you this with company A, company B. Their options are advertise, not advertise. And you're supposed to find the dominant strategy or strategies in the Nash equilibria for the payoff matrix. All right. And then they want you to redraw the payoff matrix, showing what happens if company B pays company A $15 to not advertise. So let's start with this. Okay. The way I always do these is I always say, okay, remember, company A is the first number. So when you're trying to make a decision for company A, you're only looking at that first row for not advertise and that row over here for advertise. You can totally ignore these numbers when you're trying to decide what company A should be. All right. And that makes things a lot easier. You're just looking at those numbers here. So the way I do this is I set it up and I say, okay, if company B were to not advertise, then company A will advertise because 300 here is bigger than 195 here. If company B were to advertise, then company A would also advertise because 200 here is bigger than 190. So we know that we now have a dominant strategy. Company A's dominant strategy is to advertise because no matter what B does, they want to advertise. So what is company B going to do? Company B says, what if company A were to not advertise? Now, we know they are going to advertise, but what if they didn't? Then company B they're the second set of numbers. Company B is the second set of numbers here. They would advertise because 220 is bigger than 170. And when company A advertises, they're also going to advertise because 180 is bigger than 150. So what we get here is we get a situation where we've got both of them have a dominant strategy to advertise. And the Nash equilibria is going to be right here. Nash equilibria is anytime you get the double circle, but you can't explain it that way. If they ever ask on the AP exam, why is it Nash equilibrium? You can't explain that way. You have to explain it that neither given what the other one is doing. So in other words, B knows A is going to advertise. And A knows B is going to advertise. Given they know what the other one is going to do, neither has an incentive to change. That's Nash equilibrium. Dominant strategy is you're doing what's best for you no matter what they do. Nash equilibrium is neither has an incentive to change given what the other one is going to do. So we know A is going to advertise. And so B can look at this and go, well, it doesn't do me any good to change. I'm staying and advertise. We know B is going to advertise. They have no incentive to change. Okay. Now, next part is it says redraw the payoff matrix showing what happens if B pays A to not $15 to not advertise. All right. So what we're going to do, B is paying A. So they want you to redraw the path matrix, and B, boogers. Sorry, shut that. B pays A $15 to not advertise. Okay, so now you wouldn't draw all of these numbers, but I'm just going to show you what's going to change here. Okay, so what we're looking at is we're looking at all of the not advertising ones. We're looking at all of the not advertising ones. So this is not advertised, this is not advertised, okay? And going away this way, this is not advertised, and this is not advertised. Sorry, the mailman just pulled up and it's distracting me. Sorry. I don't know if I've told you all this, but I suffer a little bit with ADD and I get really easily distracted. In the classroom, it's not so bad, but here in my house, it's like, blah. Anyways, all right. So both of these are non-advertised for, okay, I did this totally wrong. I am so sorry. Okay, so both of these, that's not advertised here. And going this way, that's not advertised, and that's not advertised. Okay. So the rest of these are advertising. So that's advertised. Both of these are definitely advertised, and these two here are both advertised. Okay. Nope. I erased one. There we go. So those are your non-advertises there. Okay. So what's going to happen now is B is going to pay $15 to A to go ahead and not advertise. So what's going to happen is B is paying A. So we have to add $15 to A if they don't advertise. So what we're going to do is we're going to add $15 here. So this comes $195. This becomes 210, right? This becomes, because it's also not advertised, this becomes 205. But since B is paying A, we got to take $15 away from this. So this becomes 155, and then they're paying them here. And even though this is advertised for B, they're paying that money. So we got to take away from there. This becomes 205. I did my math right. Okay. And so now what we've got is we've got a whole different situation here. So then we can then look at this and decide what's going to happen here. Well, what's going to happen here is if B doesn't advertise, then A is going to advertise. If B advertises, then A is going to not advertise. So what we've just done is we've just changed A's decision. We've changed A's decision where before they had a dominant strategy to advertise, we're pushing them now and possibly they might not advertise. So if A doesn't advertise, then B is going to advertise because 205 is bigger than 155. If A advertises, then B is going to advertise because 180 is bigger than 150. So what we've done is we've moved the Nash equilibrium. By company B paying A $15, we moved the Nash equilibrium where we were down here before. And interesting enough, everybody's profits went up. Okay, everybody's profits went up because before they were making 200, A was making 200, and B was making 180. Now A is going to make 205, and B is going to make 205. And so that was actually a good deal for both B and A to take that deal. So that what they would ask is, would they take that deal? And the answer is yes. So, okay, the other one I gave you, moving on, was Sarah and John. And Sarah and John are in love, and this is their path matrix. And this one's just an interesting one. I don't know if they would ever throw anything like this on the AP exam, but it's definitely fair game. Okay. If Sarah says, and again, John is the first number, so we're looking at just the first number for John. If Sarah says, hey, I want to go to the mall, then John is also going to go to the mall because 20 is bigger than 10. If Sarah says, hey, I want to go to the football game, then John's going to be like, yeah, I definitely want to go to the football game because 40 is bigger than 9 right here. So John doesn't have a dominant strategy. And what this is, they're in love. They just want to be together, right? And so John would rather go to the mall here, even though he really wants to go to the football game down here. He would rather go to the mall if Sarah says, I'm going to the mall, he'd rather go to the football game. Sarah wants to go to the football game. If John says, hey, I want to go to the mall, then Sarah is going to say, hey, I want to go to the mall too, because 30 is bigger than 4. And if John says, no, I really want to go to the football game, then Sarah is going to say, yeah, I want to go to the football game too, because 27 is bigger than 16. So what we get into here is a really interesting situation. We have a situation where there is no dominant strategy, okay? And we have 2 Nash equilibria. So you've got 2 Nash equilibrium, or equilibria, I guess they're plural, equilibria. We've got 2 Nash equilibria. Given what the other person is doing, the other one isn't going to switch. And that's what Nash equilibria is. But yet there's no dominant strategy. Now the question is, what are they going to do? And the answer is, we don't know. They're going to sit there and say, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. But what really is happening here is Sarah really wants to go to the mall, but she doesn't want to hurt, John's feeling. And John's really wants to go to the football game. He don't want to hurt Sarah's feelings. So they're going to sit there and be miserable all day long instead of just saying, hey, I want to do this. Right? One of them's got to take control. So anyway, this is really interesting to look at because you got 2 Nash equilibria, which is possible, no dominant strategy. So, all right. And there it is. Got that. And we're going. All right. Just reviewing real quick some key terms for oligopoly: mutual interdependence. The decision of one affects the decision of the other. You cannot make your decision. In other words, going back to this, company A can't say, I want $300 in profits. Because the only way they get $300 in profits is if B didn't advertise while they advertised. Okay. But they don't get to say, I want 300 profits. What's going to end up happening is, if you go back to the original one here, what's going to happen is they're going to end up with $200 profits. They're not going to end up with 300. Even though I circled the 300 here, they're not going to get it. It's going to end up down here in this bottom right-hand quadrant. So that's mutual interdependence. The decision of one affects the other. Neither one of them can unilaterally make that own decision. Game theory is that what this whole thing is called. You're playing the game. And one of the discussions you're going to be talking about is game theory in your real life, things that come up a little bit later on. Players are who's involved. Like in the last one, it was John and Sarah are the players. The strategy is, what should you do? For John and Sarah, it was mall or football game. And some of them will actually do it where the AP exam now is changing it, where instead of doing just 2 strategies like this, they're making this like go early and late. Okay, that's a common one. So now we've got 8 different numbers, or 8 different payoffs here in the middle, and we've got 4 different strategies. So if you say company B early, we know you're not reading the graph right. You're not reading the path metrics right, because company B can't choose early. Company B can only choose advertise or not advertise. Company A can choose early or late. They can't choose advertise or not advertise. So that's why a lot of them are being written now, just so that we really know when we're grading these whether or not you're reading the payoff matrix. So the strategies is those 4 things, and then the payoff is the numbers in the middle. We call it a payoff for the prisoner's dilemma. Remember, it was years in jail, which isn't really a payoff. It's kind of a punishment, but we still call it a payoff. You know what a dominant strategy is, and we know what Nash equilibrium is. So these are the key terms that you would need to know and be able to use when talking about game theory. Since there's no graphs, you're more likely to have to write something. The players are, the strategy is, Nash equilibrium is this and that. And let me cover one last thing here. Anytime you're explaining something, like, for example, going back to this one right here, Nash equilibrium, let me erase this over here. Nash equilibrium is read as the payoff. So Nash equilibrium here is advertise. It is not 200 and 180. 200 and 180 are payoffs. Nash equilibrium is advertise and advertise. Dominant strategy is based on strategies also. So the dominant strategy for A is advertise, and the dominant strategy for B is advertise. So you got that. Next thing is that if you ever have to explain why, always use the numbers in the graph. Okay. So in other words, if you have to explain why company B chose this right here, this 180, you would say, because if A advertises 180 here is bigger than 150. That's how we know you're reading it. You have to use the numbers in the graph. Why does B advertise? Because if A does not advertise, they will advertise because 220 is bigger than 170. And if A advertises, then B will advertise because 180 is bigger than 150. So you're explaining it that way. You may have to stop and rewind and listen to this stuff again, because I know it's really complicated when you're doing it yourself. And it's, for me, it's easier when I'm in front of a classroom teaching this than talking to a whiteboard. But anyways, all right, here we go. We are now moving on to, oh, no, I'm sorry, a little bit more oligopoly, some definitional stuff. So an oligopoly is inefficient. And even though we don't draw graphs, you do need to know that price does not equal marginal cost. Even though we don't draw graphs, they're not efficient. They're not allocated efficiency. Remember, allocated efficiency is when price equals marginal cost. That's called allocative efficiency. And they are not going to be allocated efficient. Okay, they're going to charge a higher price and produce a lesser output. So if you look at this stuff, or I'll come back to this in a minute. If you look at the stuff that we've learned, you've got perfect competition over here. Perfect competition has the lowest price and the greatest quantity. Way over here at the other end of the spectrum, you've got monopoly. Okay, monopolies, remember, they're price makers. They're going to have the highest price and they're going to offer the lowest quantity because that's profit maximized for them. In between those is right here is going to be oligopoly, and right here is going to be monopolist competition. Now they're not exactly, spread out, even like this, because you can have some companies that are more oligopolistic. Like if there's only literally 2 companies that produce something, they're going to be way over here close to monopoly. If there's 17 companies that produce something, they're going to be more over here towards monopolist competition. So, but you got this sliding scale here, and it's based on the price and the quantity that they offer here. So if they ever ask a question about this, you need to know that. One thing we definitely know for sure is none of these 3 are allocated efficient. Okay, these 3, price does not equal marginal cost, where a perfect competitor is allocated efficient. So a perfect competitor is price equals marginal cost. So there you go. All right, going back to this. And oligopolies have an incentive to collude. So what I did here, when I had you go where company B paid A, that's called collusion. It's actually illegal. And you notice the reason why they had an incentive to collude, instead of being down here and A earning 200, B earning 180, now A is going to earn 205 and B is going to earn 205. So by doing that, they both do better off, right? But that's illegal because now where's that profit come from? It comes out of the consumer's pockets is where it comes from. So you're not allowed to collude, but they do have an incentive to collude. Problems collusions is that they have different demand and cost differences. Okay, Home Depot does not have the same costs as Lowe's. It does not have the same demand as Lowe's. Okay, in particular for some products, they have a higher demand or a lesser demand. The more firms there are, the harder it is to agree. It's kind of like, it's easier to keep a secret between 2 people, but you start adding a third, a fourth, and a 5th person, it's very hard to keep a secret. Everybody has an incentive to cheat. OPEC, you hear about OPEC, the oil producing nations of the world. Oil producing nations of the world, they literally sit down and discuss outputs. How much oil are we going to release this month or this week? I don't know how they do it, but how much oil are we going to release? And when they do that, that's collusion. It's illegal, but we can't do anything about it because they're in another country and they are another country, so we can't make them not cheat. But what happens is oil prices are not sitting at $8, $9 a gallon here in the United States, because if one of them, if they collude to try to raise the price to $8 or $9 a gallon for us, some of those countries are going to cheat because they can then sell more oil at a lower price, And so that drives the price back down, because if one lowers the price, they're all forced to lower the price. That's what you'll usually find in oligopolies, that when one lowers the price, they all have to lower the price. That's always neat. There's always potential entry. There's always new companies that come in, and of course it's illegal. So oligopolies have difficulty achieving monopoly outcome. Anytime you see an EK like this in these notes, that means that's an essential knowledge that the College Board says you need to know for the AP exam. And it says oligopolies have difficulty achieving monopoly outcome for reasons similar to those that prevent players from achieving outcomes in presidential land. In other words, cheating on each other. That's what that really is. Okay. All right. Here we go. Let's go to the new stuff. Monopolistic, factor market. Okay, we're moving into a whole new unit now, going a different direction. We're moving into the factor market here. One of the hardest things about dealing with the factor market is remembering which market you're in. There's the product market, where we buy goods and services. So if I go to Amazon and order something, that's product market. If I go to Kroger and buy some bread, that's product market. I'm buying a good or service. And in the product market, we label the vertical axis as price, horizontal axis as quantity, and we have good old supply and demand, and we put them together. That gives us our equilibrium quantity and our equilibrium price, okay? And then, of course, in the product market, we have a perfect competitive firm, we have a monopoly, we have an oligopoly, and we have a monopolistic competitor, okay? So we have all those guys in the in the product market. Where we're going to go now is we're going to go to the factor market. Okay, the factor market is where we, as households, you and I, sell our labor, sell our land, sell our capital, and then become entrepreneurs. That's the factor market. We're selling our factory production. Right now, I am actually working in the factor market. I'm selling my labor. Gabs is paying me to teach you. So I'm selling my labor, right? Who's buying my labor? Gabs is. Gabs is buying my labor. So in the factor market, it's the workers, and we almost always talk about the workers. It does include land. Like up the street where I used to live, there's a big giant Walmart. They didn't own that land. They actually leased that land. They rented it from an individual who owned it. An individual owned it and rented that land to there. Okay, that individual was selling that land, and Walmart was paying them every month for the use of that land. And it also works for labor, and it also works for capital. Capital is a little bit weird. Capital is businesses go to the banks to borrow money. If you take a macro class, you'll learn about this. Businesses go to banks to borrow money. Well, where do they get that money? They get it from our savings. So we put our money in the bank then turns around and loans it out. And that's how capital is negotiated here. But fortunately, in this class, we're going to pretty much always talk about the worker. It's a lot easier. They could ask a land or a capital question, but they almost never do. It shows up about every 4 or 5 years in the AP exam. Okay. Again, always pay attention to what market you're in. It's easy to be confused whether or not you're in the product market or the factor market, and you'll see that in just a few minutes here. All right, so one thing to understand is that anytime money is spent on productive resources, okay, households then use that money to purchase goods and services. All right, I'm retired. Why am I teaching this class? Well, I'm teaching this class because I love teaching economics and I don't want to leave it. But it's also nice having the money, right? So what am I doing with that money? Well, my wife and I are going on a cruise later on this month, or for the end of the year. We're going on a cruise, right? Well, I'm using some of that money to buy a good or service. So I get paid in the factor market and I spend it in the product market. That's not that important right now. All right. So there's in the product market, we had perfect competition, monopolistic competition, oligopoly, and monopoly. In the factor market, we just have two of them. We have perfect competitive factor market, and we have something called a monopsony. Probably a word you've never heard before. Everybody say it right now. Say monopsony. Okay. It is probably a word you've never heard of. In reality, nothing is either one of these. Everything is in between. There is some stuff that's more monopsonistic, and there's a lot of stuff that's perfect competition. In perfect competition, each firm acquires a very small number of the available resource, and there's lots and lots and lots of resource available. The closest we can come pretty much to perfect competitive factor market is you guys. You guys, high school and college kids. Okay. There's lots and lots and lots of you guys. And let's face it, you really don't have any special skills. Okay. Um, you can say, do you want fries with that, sir, at McDonald's? Or you can file files at the clerk's office, at a lawyer's office, or you can, there's lots of, you work at a shoveling poop at a vet's office. There's lots of jobs you can do that don't really take any kind of special skill. Now, some of you guys might have special skills. Maybe you're a pianist and you play the piano somewhere and you make money doing that. Maybe you have a lifeguarding certificate. Now you're no longer in a perfect competitive factor market because you have separated yourself from a lot of your peers. Some of you guys are saying, but I'm a senior. I'm way better than a junior. No, you're not. Not unless you have some sort of skill that the junior doesn't have. The employer does not care whether or not you're a senior or a junior, other than maybe maturity levels and things like that. But even then, the employer is not going to go on that. They're going to base it on skill. All right. So that'd be perfect competitive factor market. A monopsony is one where there's only one buyer of the resource. I put good or service because it could be a land or it could be capital. Okay. But for the most part, it's one buyer of the resource. If I want to be a public school teacher in Georgia, I have to have a public school teacher license. Okay. And if I want to teach in Gwinnett County, then only Gwinnett County is going to hire me. I'm going to work for Gwinnett County school system, which is who I worked for 31 years. And so you kind of have that. Professional sports are sometimes considered monopsonies because if you want to be a professional football player, you work for the NFL and that sort of stuff. But for the most part, monopsonies don't exist. Even perfect competitive factor market, everything's really in between. But what again was we learn about these guys so we can then understand, how the market as a whole works. All right, so a couple things I want to remind you on here. Okay, I want to remind you that marginal definition of marginal product. Marginal means change. And so this is the change in production. What's the change in production by what? By adding another unit of resource. All right. Marginal product is in the product market. So it's the additional production that's brought about from an additional unit of resource. So I hire another workers. Maybe I have a Pet McGee's Pizza Palace and I sell pizza, obviously, Pat McGee's Pizza Palace, and I hire another worker. How much more pizza am I going to sell by hiring that other worker? That's marginal product. We learned about this thing called the law of diminishing marginal returns. The law of diminishing marginal returns is you're adding a fixed resource. No, you're not. You're adding a variable resource to a fixed resource. You're adding a variable resource like workers. So this is the quantity of labor to like a restaurant. Okay, there's only that one restaurant. You can't make it any bigger. So you're adding the labor to the restaurant. Well, if the restaurant's getting crowded with workers, that next worker you hire isn't going to give you as much additional output as the previous worker. If you go back and watch the videos that I did on this, I did it and I used Brewster's ice cream and I had 2 windows. And I talked about what if you hired one person and then you hired a second person, you hired a third person, and fourth. And I did the whole thing on the video. So if you haven't seen that, go back and watch that. Anyways, that's law of diminishing marginal returns. And this is going to become important here again in this unit. This concept of law of diminishing marginal returns is going to become important here in just a few minutes. Okay, next. So here is a chart, and it's got a chart of numbers here. And let me kind of walk you through each one of these so you don't get confused about what these are. They will sometimes give you charts like this on the AP exam. You're expected to be able to read them and explain what's going on here. All right, so the first column is unit of resource. This would be like quantity of labor. This is not quantity of output. This is you're in the resource market or the factor market. All right. So we can hire 0 workers or 1 worker or 2 workers or so on and so forth. The second one is your output. It's how much you're actually producing. This is in the product market. It's quantity. Now, most of the time throughout the whole semester, when we do quantity, we do 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then we compare that with price and we show that, we do like if I'm drawing a supply and demand curve here, I actually write this as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that, right? And so we change by units of 1 as we move up the demand curve from here I have to do a different color. We go from here to here, then we went from a quantity of 3 to a quantity of 4, right? We do it by quantities of 1. But that's not the way reality works. If I hire another worker at McDonald's, that worker isn't going to sell one more hamburger, right? That worker is going to change. And so what happens in reality, this is more reality here, is that the numbers are not changing by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, this is total product. So it's the total output. So what we want to do is we now want to get marginal product. And I put this as MPP. You are more than welcome. In fact, I would encourage you to call it just regular old marginal product. Okay. But the reason why I put MPP is some books call it marginal physical product at this point. They do this because we're going to learn a new one here at the end called marginal revenue product. And so to not get confused, they just call them marginal product and MP and MRP. We call it marginal MPP and MRP. I'm going to just all call it marginal product because that's the way I was trained. Okay, so marginal product, again, we talked about it a minute ago. Marginal product is the change in total product and the change in the quantity of resource. So what we do here to get marginal product, we already learned this once, so this should just be a review. 0 minus 7 divided by 1 minus 0 is 7. We add the second worker. We have the second worker right here. Now we're going to get a total of 13. So what did he add? He added 13 minus 7, which is 6, by adding that next worker. Next worker adds 5, 18 minus 15, right? Remember, marginal is the difference in totals, and you can always get total by adding, and I know I've gone over this, some of y'all probably remember it, some of y'all don't, by adding the marginal. So 7 plus 6 plus 5 plus 4 plus 3 is 25. Okay, if you add all the marginals, you get your total. And then if we hire 6 worker, then we're going to get 2 more, so now it goes to 27. So there's that there. Okay, so now we go to the columns. Now we know we've got our quantity of labor in the first column. We've got our quantity of output. So the first column is factor market. Second column is product market. Third column is product market because it's production. Fourth column is also product market. It's production. It's price. It's the price of the product, right? And so price of the product is $2. What this tells us is that this firm is a perfect competitor in the product market because they can sell 18 units at $2. They can sell 27 units at $2. Or they can sell 101 units at $2. All right. They are price takers. So in the product market, we're perfect competitors. We don't know we are in the factor market. We don't know if we're a monopsony or a perfect competitive factor market. We just know that in the product market, we're perfect competitors. Okay. Then we get our total revenue. Total revenue is always price times quantity. So we're selling 7 times 2 is 14. 13 times 2 is 26, and so on and so forth. So we get our total revenue here. Okay, this is the total amount of money that's coming in the cash register. All right, so these first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns are stuff that you've actually already learned in the past or should be aware or seen it before. We didn't really talk about quantity of labor much, but this shouldn't be anything new to you. If you don't remember, that's fine. I get it. I've been a teacher for a long time. I've had many students when I've gotten to this. They were like, I don't remember this at all. Anyways, you saw this way back when we learned about cost curves. Is when you saw it for the very first time, way back, 5, 6, 7 weeks ago. So anyways, so now I got a total revenue. Now we get to learn something brand new. The last thing here is called marginal revenue product. Okay, marginal revenue product is defined. It's an increase in the total revenue resulting from the use of an additional variable input. Okay, that's how they define it. That's how they talk about it. But let me put it in English. Okay, in English, here's what this means. When I hire the first worker right here, he's going to produce 7 more units. I'm going to sell them for $2 a piece. So he's adding $14 to my cash register. That's MRP. When I hire the second worker, I'm now going to sell 13 units at $2 a piece. So I'm going to get $26 in my cash register. But how much more am I getting? Before I was getting 14, now I'm getting 26. It's the change in total revenue divided by the change in the quantity of worker. By hiring that one more worker, I'm getting $12 more in my cash register. This is an important concept. This is really important to understand everything else happens in this unit. Okay, MRP is the additional revenue that you get from hiring an additional worker. So if I'm currently hiring 4 workers, and I'm bringing in $44 into my cash register. If I hire the 5th worker, the additional worker of 1 will give me $6 more. I go from 44 to 50. So it's going to give me $6 more, right? Now, here's the interesting thing about that is you got it. This is what so many people don't understand in the real world here. Okay. Let's suppose that you're coming to me and you want to work, and I've already hired 4 workers. And if you want to work for me, you want to be that 5th worker. Okay. You want to be that 5th worker and you want to come work for me. You're going to put $6 more in my cash register. Maybe that's $6 an hour. Am I going to pay you minimum wage to work for me? Am I going to pay you $6.25 to work for me? And the answer is no. So I'm not going to hire you. This is how businesses make their decisions. They're going to look at the additional revenue that's coming into the cash register by hiring that next worker. And if you ain't bringing enough into the cash register, I don't need you. And so I'm going to fire you, right? Now, one of the assumptions we always make over here is that all workers are the same, that every worker is the same, and one worker is not better than another worker. So, all right, so that's what MRP is. MRP is the additional revenue that comes in from hiring an additional unit of resource. And I say resource, usually always you deal with workers. This could be capital, it can be land and that sort of stuff. So that's your MRP. All right. Now, once we got that, remember you have the law of diminishing marginal returns. Okay, the law of diminishing marginal returns, we saw it here. We saw that, we saw that the marginal product was 7 and it kept on diminishing. This is the law of diminishing marginal returns at work here. Well, the law of diminishing marginal returns has a lot to do with why the marginal revenue product looks like this, why it's not 14, 14, 14, 14, 14. Because when you hire a next worker, here, when I hire this 3rd worker, that 3rd worker can only give me 5 additional units of production, right? The 4th worker can only give me 4 additional units of production. That's diminishing marginal product. It has nothing to do with the 4th worker being worse than the 3rd worker. It has to do with the fact that you're adding that 4th worker to a fixed resource. Okay, and we defined that already, the law of diminishing marginal returns here. And because of that, your marginal product also goes down like this. All right, now we move on. I already defined it for you. There's a couple ways to calculate this. You can actually take, and there's a lot of questions in the test about this on the AP exam. You're taking the AP exam. I say a lot every year. Every year there's a question on there like this. I was on the test fellow committee. We didn't do that on purpose. It's just this is a concept that's important to understand in this unit. Okay, we didn't purposely go through and say, hey, we need to ask this. We wrote questions and then somebody out away from us put the actual test together. This shows up a lot. Okay, so for a perfect competitor, MRP can be calculated as marginal product times price. So if you go back here, it's nothing more than marginal product here times price of the product. So 7 times 2 is 14, 6 times 2 is 12, 5 times 2 is 10. So you can calculate it that way, or the sure foolproof way of doing it will always work is the change in total revenue divided by the change in quantity of labor. So 26 minus 14 is 12 divided by 2 minus 1, right? So for perfect competition, there's 2 ways of doing it. Perfect competition, you can do marginal product times price of the product will give you your MRP, okay? That only works for perfect competition. For monopolistic for a monopsony or anything that's non-perfect competition, you have to do the change in total revenue divided by the change in the quantity of labor. Remember, delta is change. That's your MRP. For a perfect competitor, either way will work. For a monopsony, only this way will work. So they may ask you to do it. They may give you numbers in like a word problem, and you have to be able to calculate it. And you have to understand that it's this way, calculate one way for perfect competition. All right, so the MRP is actually a demand curve. So if I were to draw this out for you, we have our price here and we have our quantity, but this is going to be in the factor market. This is very important. Don't just put quantity, because this implies that you're in the product market. This is actually quantity of labor. This is how many, so you've got to add that L there. Now we know we're in the labor market. If it's quantity of capital, then you do either quantity of C or quantity of K, right? If it's a land market, then you do quantity of L, which I know that same thing's land, but it's labor, but that's okay. They would have to tell you what's going on there. But anyways, if you just put Q, it's wrong. Okay. Anything I grade in this unit, if you just put Q, it's wrong. You've got to put Q of L, because we're talking about the factor market, not the product market. And that demand curve is downward sloping, and it's your MRP. This is your demand for the worker. Okay. So if you go back and look at this, and I were to graph this number up, boogers. Didn't go far enough back. If I were to graph this for you, you notice that it goes down at a quantity of labor of 1. I'm at 14. 2, I'm at 12, and so on and so forth. So if I go back to this, I could say at a quantity of 1, I'm 14. At a quantity of 2, what was I, 12, and so on and so forth. So you can draw this graph. This is the demand for labor. It's downward sloping. Okay, at a higher wage rate. Now I'm going to change this because we're in the factor market here. I'm going to change this over here. And in the factor market, instead of price is fine. Okay, you're allowed to use price, but let's be more specific. Let's call this the wage rate, because in workers you hire, you don't pay them a price, you pay them a wage. I get paid a wage, not a price, right? So to be more specific, at a higher wage rate, I don't want to hire as many workers. At a lower wage rate, I'm willing to hire a greater quantity of workers, my demand. And this is something else interesting. In the product market, when I go to the store, the households demand and the businesses supply or sell, right? In the factor market, the households supply. I supply my labor, and the business demands. So we switch roles. We switch roles in the factor market. We are the sellers in the factor market, but we are the buyers, you and me, are the buyers in the household, right? The business is the seller in the product market, and the buyer in the factor market. Okay. Take a look at this. This column is the same as we just saw. This column is the same as we just saw. This column is the same as we just saw, but notice what's happening here. Notice that the price is decreasing. This is an imperfect competitor that has a downward sloping demand in the product market. Their demand curve is downward sloping. In order to sell another unit, what do they have to do? They have to lower their price. So this would be an imperfect competitor. This is your monopolistic competitor, your monopoly, and your oligopoly, not perfect competition. And that one that I showed you earlier, this would be a firm, this one right here, this would be a firm that has a perfectly elastic demand curve. They can sell as many units as they want at that product price of $2. Okay, that would be a perfect competitor. And they're price takers. They can sell as many as they want at $2. Here, I'm showing you the exact same information. Okay, like I say, the first 3 columns are the same, but the price has to decrease. That's going to change what total revenue looks like. It's also going to change what MRP looks like. You can calculate it the same way. Total revenue is still price times quantity. Your MRP, though, only way to calculate MRP is the change in total revenue divided by the change in quantity of labor. And this again is quantity of labor. This is quantity of output, right? So right here, 39.60 minus 31.20 is $8 divided by 3 minus 2. You throw that in there because they could be mean. Hopefully they won't try to trick students like this on the AP exam. It's something I fought about when I fought. We didn't have to fight very hard because we were all in agreement. But some rear end could get on the test development committee and say, we should try to make sure if they're really testing to calculate it right. And instead of doing higher, one, so we go 0, 5, 10, 15. If they ever did something like this, where you're changing by 5 workers, you're hiring 5 workers at a time, then you literally have to do, this first one will be 1820 divided by 5, because it's the change in over here. So just be aware of that. Surely they're not going to do that on the AP exam. That would just be stupid. Because we try very hard to never trick students with tricky questions. The AP exam, AP micro exam prides itself being very non-tricky. It's the material, you don't type thing. So anyway, so you calculate your MRP here. Now what's going to happen is if we were to graph this MRP right here, which is an imperfect competitor in the product market, versus this MRP, which is a perfect competitor in the product market, here's what they would look like. Notice this starts at 14 and goes to 2. And the other one starts at 18 and goes to -5. See how this falls faster? This has a steeper slope. So the first one I showed you, we were to draw this out again, quantity of labor and wage, that MRP would look like this. And the second one, the MRP would look more inelastic. Okay, and the reason why is because for the second one, not only are they getting diminishing returns here, the law of diminishing marginal returns, but they're also having to lower the price. So they're producing less additional production, and the price is falling. And because of that, this MRP falls at a faster rate. That has been a test question for on the AP exam. You have to explain this. You have to explain, what does the demand curve for a monopsony look like compared to the demand curve of a perfect competitor in the product market? I'm sorry, no. What does the demand in the factor market for a monopoly look like compared to the demand in the factor market for a competitor? And you had to tell them that it's more inelastic or steeper. And the reason is because not only are they experiencing diminishing marginal returns, but they also have to lower the price in order to sell another unit. Perfect competitor can sell as many units as it wants at $2. But this guy here, he's stuck. And if he wants to go from selling 13 units to selling 18 units, he has to lower the price from 240 to 212. All right, now we have our MRPs. All right, got that. Every time we learn a curve, we then shift it. We shift it and then we rotate it. We're going to shift it first. So the determinants of resource demand, okay, the 2 biggest ones they're going to ask about on the AP exam is price of the product, output prices, price of the product, and the productivity of the worker, how productive the worker is. All right, these are the 2 biggest things that shift the demand curve for labor. The demand for labor is price of the product, productivity of the worker. And you're going to have an activity that you have to do for this class where they're going to give you a scenario and you have to shift the demand curve the correct way. Okay, this is called derived demand. Probably never going to, they may use that vocabulary in passing, but they don't sit here and try to memorize it. But if the price of the product and productivity of the worker changes, then the MRP changes. Okay, let me show it to you. Okay, if the price of the product goes up, then the demand for the worker goes up. If the price of the product goes down, the demand for the worker goes down. So they move in the same direction. The price of the product and the demand for the worker go in the same direction. Okay, now let me show you how we do that. Okay, so and this is the same data that I gave you earlier. I'm just going down to 4 units just to make it simple. What I'm going to do is here was our MRP. So this is MRP here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new MRP. I'm going to MRP1 or prime, right? And I'm going to do that by changing the price. The price of the product changes from, instead of 2, it changes to $3. Well, this is perfect competition, so we have 2 ways of calculating MRP over here. We can either do marginal product times price, which is the easiest way to do, which is 7 times 3 is 21, 6 times 3 is 18, 5 times 3 is 15, and 4 times 3 is 12. Notice that the MRP shifted outward. If we were to actually graph this, the blue line would be further out than the black ones. black numbers would be, right? The other way to calculate marginal physical product is the change in total revenue. So we would have had to come in here and said this was 21, this was 18. No, total revenue. It's total revenue, I'm sorry. 7 times 3 is 21. 13 times 3 is 39, right? Uh-oh, went in trouble. Anyways, 18 times 3 is 54, right? And 22 times 3 is 66. So then we could, the other way of doing this, we could have done the change in total revenue. 39 minus 21 is 18, right? Divided by 2 minus 1. So notice that what I want you to get out of this is that anytime the price of the product changes, it changes the demand for the worker. When the price of the product changes, it changes the demand for the worker, and they work in the same direction. Okay. Second thing that shifts the demand for the worker is the productivity of the resource, how productive the resource is. In other words, what's happening with their marginal product. Okay. If we can make you more productive, okay, and this is one of those things that people don't get. If I can make you more productive, I'm going to hire more workers, not less. Okay, one of the assumptions that people always make is that machines replace workers. Okay, that is not true. Machines replace inefficient workers. If you can only take a bolt, let's say you work in a factory, you can only take this one bolt and screw it onto a car, and that's all you can do, you can be replaced. Okay, but here's what's going to happen. If we put a machine in for that one person, then everybody down the line has to work faster because the machine is going to be faster than the person, right? So we have to hire more workers down the line to keep up with the machine that we just did to put that thing in, right? And so the idea is what's happening to your marginal production, your additional production. Okay, so let me show you to you here. If the productivity of the worker increases, if we can make you more productive. So instead of saying, let's say everybody's marginal product goes up by 1, right? So the first guy, instead of adding 7 additional units, they add 8. So this becomes 8, right? The second worker, instead of adding 7, instead of adding 6, can add 7. This person can add 6. This person can add 3, right? So everybody's at 5, can add 5. Okay, so everybody's adding 1 additional unit. When I hire that, we're adding 1 additional unit. Look what's happening over here. This now becomes 15. This now becomes 21. This now becomes 26. Notice we went from 22 to 26 here. Okay, why? Because each worker is adding 1 more unit than they would have added. How do we do this? I don't know. Maybe better lighting conditions. Maybe better something. We basically put a new something in there that helps the workers all be more productive. I don't know how we do it. Okay, but watch what happens down the line here. We're still selling these products for $2 a piece. So my marginal revenue product is marginal product times price. It's one of the ways to do it. So we just do marginal product. Now it's 8 times 2 is 16. 7 times 2 is 14. 6 times 2 is 12. And 5 times 2 is 10. Notice that the red is further out to the right. So if I were to graph this, then my MRP, quantity of labor, because we're in the the factor market, wage rate, you've got your downward sloping demand curve, which is your same thing as your MRP, is the demand for the worker. Those numbers right there would coincide with these numbers right here in black. And when I increase your productivity here, it causes the demand for the worker to shift to the right. We actually want more workers. Now, again, do machines replace people? Yes, they replace the inefficient people, but you're going to have to hire more. If we get machines in that increases the productivity capacity, that means we can produce more. If we can produce more, we got to somehow sell more, right? Let's say we automate a complete assembly line of cars, right? So every worker loses their jobs. And I'm not necessarily they're all inefficient, but every worker loses their jobs. That means that assembly line is going to be able to kick out more cars, which means we need more car salesmen. We need more truck drivers to drive the cars, on the back of their 18 wheels wheeler to the dealerships, right? We need more car mechanics. See, more jobs are created by automation. They're not destroyed. They're just created in different places. And the key to you is keep that in mind. Never, never, never just learn one skill. I've been teaching for 31 years and I always kept my resume updated and I always was learning additional skills. And the reason why is that if they came into me and said, "Hey, Pat McGee, thank you very much, but you're being replaced with an online class," if you're being replaced with an online class, I could then go and do something else with my profession. I wasn't going to be unemployed. I might lose my job as a teacher, but I had other options. Always keep your door open. That's a huge thing to learn because technology can take your job. All right, we're gonna have to stop right here. That was a lot. Next week, I will talk about. I'll finish the factor market. May not even finish it. It may take me 3 weeks to get all the way through this factor market stuff here. But this should get you through the demand for the worker part. I didn't get to supply. I will do that next week. I'll talk about. We're going to change the slope of the curve, and then we're going to talk about a competitive market. We're going to put it together. We're going to do supply. Some of you guys, unfortunately, are going to be ahead of me, but I needed to make sure I teach all this stuff. So have a good evening. Hope you guys stay warm, and I'm glad to know that people are all back after the hurricane thing. And I will talk to you guys later.